call a meeting of the Concord Solar Task Force to order.
You can do it, got it.
Yeah, we'll be recording. So, okay. All right, so pulling out my agenda. Second.
You should grow a mustache.
What's that?
You look just like John Bolton. I think he looks just like John Bolton.
Thanks.
I'm looking at
That's what I
you
need.
up on the TV.
That's what I need. Here we are.
We haven't called the order yet, so I could make my.
Yes, we have. We're in session.
Oh,
buddy,
we are?
And I am now.
Oh, so you have to put that in
I
the
couldn't
meeting
call you out of order. Okay.
notes.
Our first item on the agenda tonight is meetings as minutes as available. And there was one set sent out in the meeting packet, so I know that Wendy and I have reviewed those. Are there any comments on the minutes as distributed?
I make a motion that we approve the minutes from December 2023.
Yeah, I know, it's a bit of a delay.
I second.
Okay, all in favor, we're gonna go around the room because we do have Gavin on film. So Gavin, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Wendy,
Aye.
Charlie.
Here,
That's not the right answer, Steve. And myself, aye. So they're approved unanimously. Okay. Chair's report. I've got a few things that I've been up to in the interim. And I'm gonna concede a little bit of time to Wendy, but most of that's gonna show up in item 5, which is our CCHS report. I prepared a small deck for the finance committee at the request of the chair. He requested that the focus of the deck not be on this, that, or the other, implementations we're going to do so much as on the financial characteristics of the package and what it means for the taxpayer, which is really nothing. It is really the position of the chair that the finance committee would not inherently be reviewing this because it falls under the enterprise budget. And as a budgeted item, it would come out of ratepayer funds, and therefore it's part of the operation of the light plan, and that's overseen by the light board. So I prepared a small deck of maybe 5 or 6 slides, which fundamentally made that point. That here's what we're asking from the community. There will not be any ask of the taxpayer. It will be handled by the light plant, and it will be overseen. Their budget is overseen by the light board, and it will impact rates, but it will not be something that is necessarily the position of the chair, Parshar Patel, was that we don't get into the nitty-gritty of how rates are set. That's not the purview of it's not the purview of the finance committee, how rates at the light plant are set. So they fundamentally his intent is to keep this more or less off their radar to the degree that he can. We will come up. And the other piece of the interim puzzle is that in the middle of the last couple of weeks, I got a notice from our liaison, Mary Hartman, that our hearing will be moved. We are not going to be heard by the select board. We're going to be heard on the 7th of March by the finance committee. It is a bonding authorization, and that's their purview. So it's been moved. So we do have a little more time between now and then.
So the finance committee will be involved anyway.
They will be involved. They have to hold a hearing, and we are asking for a debt issuance. And the debt issuance, there was a bit of back and forth. We'll get to that in a minute about the type of debt. But because it's a debt issuance and the obligation for the debt is the town itself, and it shows up on a finance committee here.
So when do you make the presentation as to what we're planning to do to the select board?
Right now, I don't have any.
But you will have a date for that.
I'm not sure exactly how that's going to go. They're going to need to weigh in. They're going to
evaluate our stuff.
They're going to have to evaluate our stuff.
Then you don't want them waiting until
The last
meeting.
town meeting. We'll find a way to get onto their agenda between now and then. So
Hearing too.
they will attend the hearing, but it's not their hearing. So they're gonna want
different content.
they're going to want a forum in which they have the floor and can ask the questions, etc. So
That'll be after.
So,
I
yeah.
saw the other day a report from all places, North Carolina, national one, organizing state by state sources of public financing for publicly important projects. And at least 25 of them. Would it make sense for us to explore some before the hearing and say we are hopeful for doing X?
Well, we did explore one that we were apprised of, which was this grip opportunity. And in the end, we didn't really have the kind of characteristics that that particular grant program really was valuing.
We're not gonna change the bonding
No,
structure.
we're not, no, the bonding structure is the bonding structure, and we can state that we will pursue any viable grant opportunity that comes our way or that we can make ourselves available.
As does the town in any other area.
That's right. So that goes kind of without saying, but I will be happy to make sure that that's said explicitly.
Well, some town debt offerings do not have the same judicial support that we do in terms of various provisions. So we can get a better rate, I suspect, than the town as a whole, no?
No,
Who's we?
Well, in this case, it's probably the right board.
it's just the town.
It's just the town. And we can get into that in a minute because there's been some exchange on that topic. So I'll get to that in a second.
I mean, do we really need to spend a lot of time on bonding? That's kind of.
No, we don't. No, we
Bonding
don't.
is the way we
No.
do it with CPS, with
Right.
the
It's
entire
all-
middle school.
It's all.
All standard boilerplate.
There's an issue and I will make it quick, okay?
Yeah, make
All
it
right.
quick.
Yeah, we'll make it quick. Okay, so those are the things that I did prior to and leading up to the light board meeting, which was conducted on Wednesday morning. I prepared a deck that you got in your packet for the light board. And I think that the presentation went fairly well. It really kind of drilled more or less down into the detail of how much is it going to cost us to generate electricity? And are these different opportunities valuable to the light plant? I mean, if it's going to cost us 15 cents a kilowatt hour to generate electricity on the roof of the high school, it's probably not the best economic model, and that's what it turns out to be if we only get a 20-year lifespan and et cetera, et cetera. That kind of stuff that was in that deck. And here's where the bonding question comes up. One of the members at of the light board used to work in, institutional finance of some kind, and sovereign debt, as she said. And she took us to task for the kind of bonding that the town was doing and said this should be an actual revenue bond where the revenues of the light plant are bound to the bond structure itself rather than a general obligation bond. This went around in a circle with the finance director and Carrie and back and forth. And it has, I think, been left exactly where it is. She requested that we change language inside the text of the article to urge the town to use general obligation bonds, which would leave the door open to using revenue bonds. And I sent her a crisp note saying that's out of scope because I tried to change urge. I tried to change urge to require to get the solar task force set up. And I was knocked down by the moderator. So I just told her I have a personal experience with that from just last year. You're out of scope. So I think that's dead. That's a dead issue. A dead issue on a debt issue. So I think that's more or less it. Oh, otherwise, in other news, Wendy attended a meeting of the school committee because I was unable to do that last Tuesday. It was a week ago Tuesday.
Yeah.
A week ago Tuesday. So that'll come up more or less on item 5 of our agenda. But the good news there basically is they are fully on board with having solar panels on the roof of the school. And they're fully not on board with having any solar panels in the drainage basin. So that's gonna come off of that's gonna come off.
Fully off.
We'll hold it to.
I would say though, that the light plant, I sat through that too. And I thought that It was very fair and straightforward from both sides.
Yep.
And I think the light board was pleased with where we are in sorting this out.
Oh, no, the light board is very pleased. I was talking about the school.
I
committee.
know, but school committee is a separate thing.
Yeah,
That's for later.
yeah.
But I just wanted to, I didn't get to put my comment
Oh,
in
okay.
about your performance there. I thought
Oh,
you did a great job. I
Well,
think that
they are,
for those that weren't there, you should
Yeah.
know that Dean did a great job.
they
Considering
were,
we didn't have much to-
I didn't have much, my last slide, if you,
It was the nuance of where we are and why we aren't further. No, I'm serious.
No.
That's a harder job than if you have all
I'm
these.
complimenting you, but I think, ideally they would want numbers, right?
they would have wanted final numbers, they wanted.
Always easier to deal with.
We,
all the
and
good
the
stuff.
the last slide says, here's where we are, it could be 4.5 million, it could be 8.3 million, you know, it's a pretty big range, we're not there yet. So we're still working on it. So that did go pretty well, and they were able to make a motion that generally gave us, you know, some supportive language. It was like, this seems good to us. We can't vote to approve because it's not, you know, you haven't finalized what your numbers are gonna be and what projects you're actually doing. So they just gave us a, you know, generally positive, you know, motion. So
We're good.
I think that's pretty much it for Jared's comments. So,
Except for there's just one thing, the other thing with feasibility.
that's in
later?
item
Okay, fine.
5. That's in
Yep.
item 5. We'll get to that when we get to item 5.
Dean, I have a question on the, so you said the finance committee meeting is March 7th, is that
Yeah.
correct? Okay,
Correct.
that's the same date as our next meeting, so I don't know if the times conflict.
We can move that, or we
Okay.
can leave it there, and then that covers us in the event that we have a quorum present at the meeting. There you go.
We need a
So
meeting that week. Who
What's that?
knows? Maybe we don't need.
we don't need a meeting, but all I'm saying is if
Yeah.
multiple members of the finance committee of the Solar Task Force show up for our hearing date,
Yeah.
then we are a quorum and we need to be posted. So we may just leave it there as a posted meeting, but it may not be, we may not conduct any business on that particular date, but.
Okay.
It's been another wrinkle in that as far as that goes, Gavin, and
Mhm.
that our Thursday night meetings are on Thursdays, as are the finance committee meetings.
Yeah, I know.
So anytime I need to show up at a finance committee meeting, I may have to just say, see, you know, Wendy can run a meeting or something. you know,
No,
one way or-
no,
Or we
because-
move our meeting around.
No, the finance committee meetings are meetings that many of us want to attend. so-
Okay, all right, so we'll figure that out. Yeah, we can change our meeting around as necessary
Okay.
to accommodate, but right now, we'll stick with leaving that one because I don't think that we're gonna be conducting any other particular business in that window, other than getting ready to go to that meeting.
Yeah, we're good.
Yep, we're good. So we can move on to, I printed out, did I print out the?
Valerie,
You're not the wrong agenda.
this one.
Yeah, I pulled the wrong one out of my bag. I think
We could have redone the old one. We've done that.
We just pulled out the old-
I literally pulled the wrong one out. That's fine. I think that's yours. This is mine. I'm looking down, I'm like, that's not my next item. Okay, so the next item is battery value modeling. And Laura, I know that you had been out and not really all that available in the last week or so. But we are really excited to hear something about battery value modeling, because that's a real black hole right now in the way we've been approaching everything. We really don't know how that's being done, how to do that. Oh, you're muted.
So, kind of how much level of detail do you want here?
Can you speak again? Because ours is so hot, our volume
We're
is so
so
hot.
loud.
How much level of detail are you looking for?
Try those buttons.
You
Um,
wanna go through the core of the.
Yeah, I'd like to go through let's start at a high level, which is, what are the principles that the model is trying to extract value out of the battery from? I mean, how is it generally formed that we can somehow draw value from the battery?
So, similar to the peak reduction value analysis that we looked at for the solar production. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
We
you know
can
what?
hear you way too okay. We're trying to
It's loud.
turn this down. We don't really No,
There
now.
doesn't seem to be.
Should I whisper?
It's a little loud on our end too.
Is that all right? Well,
We have
Might be
a,
the microphone
we have a
sensitivity.
very fancy device here that you can see is picking all of us up and able to adjust.
Is that better? Try again.
Somebody speak from the other end.
How's that now?
Now you're muted. Now we're on 0.
Are we?
Yeah. Okay, try again. Eric, how about you say hi?
Hello, everyone.
Oh,
Oh, so low, so low. We're making
Okay.
progress.
How's that?
How's that? Okay, Laura, let's try.
Okay, so similar to the solar peak reduction value analysis that we looked at when we were trying to figure out, you know, how much could a new solar facility reduce some of our expenses at the light plant and add value beyond just the production of the solar kilowatt hours. The battery also has the capability to do peak reduction, but in a much more concentrated way. It's like a laser as opposed to a light bulb, in that you don't just count the peak reduction whenever the sun comes, right? You actually get to charge the thing exactly when you want to, meaning buy energy from the grid, store it into the battery, and then discharge it at the most valuable times. So you have much more control, so it's much more valuable. There's another source of revenue attributable to the battery that was not relevant to the solar production, and that is energy arbitrage. And that is just the idea that not only are you reducing the peak expenses, but let's say you're buying energy at 10 cents and turning around and selling it when it's worth 20 cents. So those are the main sources of revenue.
I
Oh.
mean, isn't this simply a case of we're charging the battery when rates are relatively high and then charge it when they're low, and using the energy when it's high? Is that the arbitrage you're talking
Yes.
about?
Yes.
And then there's peak reduction.
Yeah, then peak production is a separate revenue stream.
Now that part of the revenue was in the CMS storage model, was it not?
You had asked me at a previous meeting, you know, could we rely upon the financial modeling that was performed for the battery in the CMS model for future solar installations? And I said, provided that the battery investment in question has the same operating parameters, absolutely. And to the extent that it has different operating parameters, we can just change the model. But the model is, you know, very applicable, and I don't see why you guys really need to do any more work on that.
But you did arbitrage in the CMS model.
Mhm.
Yes. Okay, great.
So as anticipated, and as we've spoken throughout, we expect to be the exact same spec, which is a 4 megawatt hour storage capacity and a 2 megawatt dispatch capability, you know. So that's the same spec, as I understand it, as the CMS. So your model just stands up and it's the same fundamentally. When we're peak shaving, and we're bringing 2 batteries to bear on our peak, would we run them over a longer interval, or would we run them both kind of in parallel and dispatch over that same interval? How do you think you would engineer that, Laura?
If we were not constrained by local limitations, my thought is that we would run the batteries exactly in parallel, because you want to be charging exactly when it's cheapest and discharging exactly when it's most expensive.
Okay.
However, if we are responding to local limitations on circuits, right, then there could be different operating parameters that would dictate you operate them slightly differently.
Now, how about charge discharge cycles? What did we use for that? Was it daily, or was it set based around where we can really make hay?
Like if you're doing arbitrage, you could do that literally every day.
Arbitrage, you would.
Yeah, so what you want to take a look at the model, and this might answer a lot of your questions.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. And first, I just want to show you, oops, that's not what I wanted to do. I'm trying to figure out.
This looks like last year's,
I just want to remind you, of the,
If you can maximize it would be great.
okay, so the battery, if you remember, with the IRA credit, without the IRA credit was going to be about, this is the same one you're looking at, but we had estimated about 3.3 million in cost, 2.7 roughly after the application of the 25.5% elective pay reduction. But, you know, unlike the solar, which had a negative NPV, you can see the battery is very positive. So let's look at why is the battery 2.644 million? And the answer is that first I have to keep moving around the faces window to find what I'm looking for. This is just looking at some of the assumptions. It's a 2 megawatt battery with a 4 megawatt hour discharge. There's a certain efficiency loss associated with the use of the battery. There are similarly energy requirements to operate the battery, so those have to be accounted for. And so after you adjust for these efficiencies and energy losses, the actual power is more like 1.94 megawatts.
Can I stop for a second and ask a question?
Sure.
97.x is the raw efficiency of putting DC energy in and getting DC energy back out, I assume. And there's probably additional losses in inverter conversion where you're needing to then convert that to AC for actual use. Are there additional inefficiencies that are created through inverter conversions?
No, not in this model. This 97%, I believe, is meant to be inclusive of that. You know, if we find that's not realistic, we can change it.
Okay, I think that's a little high. I mean, I think that we're probably not going to get quite that much, but maybe we will. Because coming off an array, you have AC power, and to put it, or even if the battery is independent, it's standing in another location, you're going to be charging that with AC power that you're buying, especially if you're doing arbitrage. You're going to take AC power, got to convert it, put it in as DC, bring it out to DC, and convert it back out as AC. So I think it's unlikely you're going to get that kind of turnaround being 97. It may be true, but I question it. That's all.
So that's something that we could certainly change, and that would have the effect of reducing slightly the value of the battery. So we can play around with some sensitivities on that.
Yep. Okay.
In this model, I've assumed that we're going to charge and discharge this thing every single day. So every single day, we're going to fill up during the cheap hours, and we're going to discharge during the expensive hours every day of the year, just once, not twice. Okay.
So, question on that: on days where you're trying to hit an RNS or a capacity peak shaving event, you're still going to discharge during what amounts to the most expensive time of the day. So it's really the same thing. You're still doing arbitrage, but on those particular days, you'll be shaving a real peak.
Yeah, I mean, there's a high correlation, Dean, but it is true that it's not a coefficient of 1. In other words, there can be days where the local Eversource peak, let's say, is predicted between 6 and 7 p.m. And for whatever reason, the local clearing price, happens to be higher during a different hour, during 7 to 8 or 5 to 6. So
they're not correlated.
Perfect. But you're right, in general, they're going to be related and go together.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, they're pretty highly correlated. They're just not exactly
Not
correlated.
exactly. Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks.
The correlation is because I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay, so the energy price here is used only to figure out what we will have to pay to run the battery. It's not used for anything else.
What we pay to what?
To run the battery requires energy.
It uses kilowatt hours.
Oh, I see. Okay, yeah.
Okay, this model, there was a 3% discount rate used. There's the 25.5% IRA credit. We assumed that 10 of the 12 months we would be able to capture both the regional and the local transmission expense. So 10 out of 12 is 83%. And in this model, I've assumed that 9 out of 10 years will be able to capture the correct summer peak, or as the case may be in the future, winter peak. The other thing we need to look at is when CMLP is required to pay for capacity, let's say our peak is 40 megawatts. We don't actually have to pay for 40 megawatts capacity. We have to pay for 1.3 times 40, or whatever the ISO tells us is the reserve margin. And I've used 30% in this model, but lately it's been closer to 40 to 50%, but it could be 20%. So it's just sort of another one of those variables.
That's a dictated assessment where they're making their capacity predictions and saying, okay, you need to take on 40% more than what.
So it's extra that you basically end up having to pay for. So to the extent that the battery can offset, 1 megawatt of peak, it actually is 1.3 megawatts of capacity obligation.
Yep. Got it.
Okay, so here was the battery energy storage system this is pre-IRA. Let's see. Not sure if that's the one that was used or this one. No, sorry. Going to the wrong place. All right, let's go to the battery. Just want to remember this number. Fourth CapEx was 5172. Why is this one less?
That's solar.
Yeah, the solar, yeah.
CapEx 3338.
Laura, we're looking at last year's presentation and the CapEx was 3.3 on the battery.
Yeah, and that's what I think that's what this says. It would be after it would be this.
Yep.
Minus the 25.5%.
Does this assume that there's significant surplus energy at some times of day from the batteries?
Well, I think what it presumes is that there are times of day when energy is much less expensive if we have to pull it off the grid. So
All right, we're going to get to that in a minute. Let's put aside the capital for a moment just to get through the other way the model works, and that's something that can always be adjusted. So you have, this energy available, if you will, on an AC basis after losses.
Yep.
And you have the duration of the battery. You can see this degrades over time by 1.5%. And what we see for operating expenses, we have the inverter replacement at 20 cents a watt. I think we just did this once in year 10. Yep. And you have managed services. This is the cost to have someone actually charge and discharge the battery. This is what you guys, I think, are proposing would be provided by the Eaton Distributed Energy Resources Management System. O&M and warranties, we don't really know. We just put this number in. I don't know if that's included or whether we're really going to have to pay anything for O&M and warranties. But what I do know now that I didn't know back when we did the middle school is that our insurance policy for this thing is probably going to be about $25,000
annually. Okay.
So there may be some additional expenses here, but for the moment, that's what we've assumed.
Is that because it's sitting right next to a school building?
Yeah. Yeah.
If this is parked over at the landfill, would that be a lower number because it's
No.
risky?
No.
No, it's the cost. It's the value of the asset. Yeah, okay, all right, carry on.
These are some the small costs of the energy to operate the system. And then you've got the debt on the capital cost, which we may need to adjust. It was over a 15-year period. So our costs were debt of about $250,000 a year, and then another $60,000 in OpEx, for a total of about $330,000 a year. But if we look at the revenue side, we're coming up with $394,000. So even in year one, your expected revenue exceeds your costs, not by a ton, but by a bit. And this comes from the amount of offset transmission value. And this again assumes the 83% using $190 a year of transmission. We're using $140 a year, $169 a year of RNS forecast gets reduced by the 83%. So RNS, LNS is our local transmission expense that is allocated or charged to us by Eversource. It's a much smaller number than the ISO regional number, but nevertheless, we've included it. And we've included the capacity at about $3 a kW month, increasing over time. So if
just cover the small distance between the Eversource substation and our substation, is that basically what LNS does? Like they're providing a service which is transmitting to our substation from their substation. Is that what LNS is?
yes, that is exactly what LNS is.
What is that, like 100 yards? 300
Yeah,
yards?
well, no, it's probably,
No.
no, you have to go over there.
Yeah, I do.
You have to go learn.
Yeah.
Observe and learn, yes.
So how far is it,
It's,
Charlie?
it's eyesight, you can see it. It's, well, what is it? Quarter of a mile, maybe.
Quarter of a mile, okay.
You think it's a quarter of a mile?
Well, no, it's really to transfer energy from Eversource's points of interconnect with the ISO transmission lines to Eversource's point of interconnect with CMLP.
Oh, it's the distance, it's the full
Some substations.
from their ISO to us, all the way to us. Okay, I got it. Okay, thank you.
Well, isn't it the one that, isn't it the substation that's right across the border that's feeding us? And is that the line that you're talking about?
But Eversource has to get the energy to that substation that you're talking about.
Oh, I see, okay.
They're getting it from the ISO
Oh,
themselves.
so
So whatever the
we're
distance.
paying a chunk of that for whatever we take, okay.
Yeah.
So can we ask a couple questions?
Yeah.
So I'm, this is kind of a theoretical question, but we kind of need the answer as we go forward here. When we dispatch, we're dispatching energy that basically displaces something else that we'd otherwise have to purchase. Is that correct?
Well, when you run a battery, of course, the only way to discharge it is to have charged it to begin with.
When we dispatch at the peak, which is where we want to dispatch generally, right?
You have to have bought it at some other point.
Well, I mean, what are we displacing? What purchases are we displacing at that time?
The most expensive ones, the ones that happen between like 6 and 7 p.m.
Are these spot purchases?
Sometimes, yeah.
Well, as we think about what we're doing with this strategy, there's got to be some upper limit on what we can do with storage. It has to be a function of the amount of sort of market that we have with these sort of purchases that are not in a fixed contract. It would seem to me that you're looking at a pool of opportunity that basically is that spot stuff. Now, maybe I got that wrong, I don't know, but it seems to me that we dispatch something, we dispatch stuff out of a battery that was pulled out of a solar panel. It would seem that we would not be buying something else from the ISO.
Yeah, that's right. We're not buying that expensive 6 to 7 p.m. power.
There must be a way to figure out what the universe of that opportunity is.
We're going to look at that, Charlie.
We're going to look at that.
We're going to look at that.
Who's we?
Right now, we haven't gotten to that yet. We're just on peak production.
About the total universe across the whole operation, the entire everything, the whole entire blob, all of it. You know, if we do, how much storage could we, under this model, how much storage could we add? Could we add,
Well, okay, think about it this way. So you're only reducing your peak costs up to the amount of load you need to buy during between 6 and 7. So let's say we need to buy 40 megawatts between 6 and 7. Then in theory, you know, you could put in battery capability to discharge up to 40 megawatts. But the problem is that at some point, even though, like from a trading perspective, it doesn't matter whether you're buying or selling, a market price is the market price. And so I didn't say that very well, but what I'm trying to say is, let's say the price between 6 and 7 is $100 and it's $60 during all the other hours. If we use a battery to reduce our need to buy spot purchases, then we're avoiding having to pay $100, right? Up to the amount of spot purchases. Once we get beyond that, then we would need to start pushing energy back onto the grid. So instead of paying $100, we'll be getting paid $100, right? So it's the same value, except that we're going to have this hard export limit of 5 megawatts that the ISO imposes before we become considered a generator.
So
I'm not sure I'm getting across my point here. There's a theoretical upper limit that at any given point in time, based on the load that we have, you know, as a town, it's a theoretical upper limit that's associated with the amount of spot stuff that we're buying that's not associated with a particular contract. And if you replace all of that, that is your upper limit of what you could have for battery storage, because you wouldn't want to have any more than that.
No, you just push it back and get paid $100.
if you had more battery, you could sell it.
But you wouldn't, no, you don't want to sell it because you're not gonna get anything for it.
No, you're getting the spot market price.
You're-
So you're avoiding the inbound 20, well, you know,
Yeah.
the spot, but then you're pushing it back at that market rate.
If you
You're
can put back
getting
during the peak, then you can make some money, because that's when
Yeah.
it's expensive.
Goes
energy.
both ways,
Spot,
right?
It works both ways.
Right, exactly right.
But yeah, interesting.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
So there is no upper limit.
No, no.
Yeah. Yeah,
We might run into acreage problems. then-
Well, I think we should talk about that more, because that's a question that people have.
All right. Anyway,
so $90, that's how you get a portion of, you get, let's see, so I've added, you get about $370,000 out of that. Okay, because I've also added this category called energy arbitrage. And this is the one you're gonna like, I think, Charlie, because what this takes is the 3.86 megawatts that we're actually gonna be able to either buy and or sell. And it's gonna multiply by a value. Okay, and then assumption C17 is 365 times a year. So every single day, 365 days a year, we're going to discharge 4 megawatt hours. And how much are we going to make on that? Well, we're going to go to AF 123. So that is this number down here. This is a long-term average of how much you can make by charging the battery. Just this is a fixed schedule. You're not deviating it every day. Okay, just for the purpose of modeling this, I said we're going to charge it at 1 megawatt an hour over 4 hours between hour ending 12, so starting at 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. every single day. We're going to charge it when energy's worth these numbers, and we're going to sell it 2 megawatts an hour for 2 hours during these 2 hours. Okay, and this is what your cost is, this is what your revenue is, and that's how much you make. And these are over the years. So in 2014, you would have made $21. In 2015, you would have made 16, 14, 14, 19, 11, 12, 44. When the prices are high, whenever we have a tight supply situation, prices get high or cold winter, this energy arbitrage value goes high. So instead of being $14 or $15, it's more like $40. So we saw that in 2022. But if we take a long-term average, that's just an average of all these years, including the $44 a year. It's about $19 a megawatt hour. Okay, so the battery says, I'm gonna earn $19 a megawatt hour on 4 megawatt hours every single day of the year. So that gives you an extra $26,000 of revenue. And when you add that to the peak reduction value, this $190 per kW year on 1.936 megawatt hours or 1,936 kilowatt hours, that adds up to $394,000 a year. So it's a pretty big chunk of change. And assuming I didn't make an error with this capital cost, that's what's driving the positive cash flow. So if you're bringing in 394 and you're spending 330, your cash flow, it's 64,000 in the first year, and it increases over time, mostly because the RNS value increases. The energy arbitrage doesn't really increase, but this does.
So, Laura, what do you use as a predictive data set for these hourly prices to try to understand the value of this going forward into the future? Do you have
I haven't tried to alter yet the past. I've simply said, look, if prices were to behave in the next 10 years as they have over the previous 10, so this is 2014 to 2024, and showed similar variation in the lowest price hours versus the highest price hours, here's the revenue generated. It doesn't attempt to say, and because of changes in, load and supply, I think that's going to change in the following way, and therefore that would impact, right, the revenue.
Yep. So I'm just throwing this out there, but in my exploration of this whole battery question, one of the things I ended up stumbling across was the fact that NREL keeps this wild and crazy database called the Cambium database, in which they predict energy prices out into the future, and they do it on an hourly basis. It's crazy. So
Look at that.
and they do it for 30 years. and they do it with a lot of weird scenarios and assumptions like, oh, this technology is going to come in and it's going to expand at this point, and then they have other scenarios. So
So
there's
you
like,
gotta pick your scenario.
you pick your scenario. I picked the mid scenario as the, I just want a vanilla scenario. Because I didn't have any way to predict the future and, but we could use that database, which they maintain. And that it is updated every year as new assumptions come into it. So if you take a snapshot today and then you come back to it 2 years from now, they might say, oh, solar's taken off much more rapidly than we anticipated, and so we're going to change, the penetration levels of solar, and then prices in that database into the future will look very different.
They compare their old predictions to reality, adjusted slightly, predicted again.
And predict they keep moving forward. They keep turning the crank, so to speak. Yeah.
What have we done with the?
I'm sorry, Phil.
It's just a
Another
a
source.
possible source, because you're using history and just saying it will
Stays the
behave
same.
more or less the same.
Yeah.
The prices might not be the same prices, but the ratios will be more or less the same. We'll be able to get
Influencers are the same.
similar kinds of returns, so to speak. So,
But- They do that on a regional basis.
yes, they do. When I asked for data, I clicked Massachusetts. I would like Massachusetts energy prices, yes. I don't know that they do it down to the local, Middlesex County level, but they definitely do it down to the Massachusetts level, yes.
Can I ask two questions?
Yes.
Laura, why aren't you charging it at 1 in the morning when it's really cheap versus the middle of the day?
Because I should have, what I'm trying to say, I should have not stopped sharing. That's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so let's look at, can you guys see the Excel spreadsheet again?
Yeah.
So I was thinking the early morning, you're in the 50s, 46.
Okay, so that's a good point, and that would be smart. The reason I charged it during these hours, and I specifically, locked them down, if you will, during these hours, is because of my assumption that because of solar saturation, we would have to need the battery to absorb the solar production on that circuit in order to be able to keep operating.
Okay,
You could time it differently though, couldn't you? So that you charged,
well,
in
50%.
periods when we weren't going to experience solar saturation, you could do that
yeah, whenever.
when the time was
Yeah.
good, and then it was, then when you're gonna have a peak. During the times when you have peak issues,
Right.
charge it, at the time of solar peak.
You know, you have a cloudy day coming up, you go, okay, well, let's.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
we'll
you know,
have to get that granular, but,
Winter versus
it's gotta
summer.
be the solar. Are these solar peaking problems seasonal or are they not? I mean, Dave said, oh, it happens all the time.
Right now they're primarily seasonal and they happen in the shoulder months, meaning like April, May, September, October, late September. When the load is fairly low, there's not a big cooling demand or a big heating demand, and it's very sunny.
That's what I thought, yeah.
It also tends to happen when the kids go on break and everybody leaves town. Sunday mornings are especially tricky during that week, like between 11 and 2. Is sometimes when we'll have engineers actually sitting out at the substation because we're afraid we're going to go to zero.
You're on April vacation time and
Right.
everybody's
next
out of
week
town,
is-
nobody's using electricity.
Yeah.
So this is the sitting at the substation issue, right?
Right, so the other thing, Laura, I'm assuming that that we're keeping battery income costs separate from our solar.
Yes,
Technically, if you need to evaluate solar for what you're offsetting or earning or whatever. You're not necessarily feeding that solar power directly into the battery and getting free energy into the battery because for accounting purposes, we need to earn on the solar and
Right.
pay on the battery.
Right.
So there's a clean cut between the technologies and the models.
yes.
Okay, I think we need to kind of stay on track with our agenda
Wait,
here.
have you got to the point yet? Or are you gonna get
I
access
have a
to this?
question.
So Laura, so the one thing you could do, if you could send Wendy and me a copy of this so we can see and kind of integrate it with the way we're modeling some of these other assets that we're thinking of buying, like the one on the roof or, it would really be helpful for us to understand. So if you could do that, that would be great.
And I'll look into the capital. I know it is at the rate it's at for a reason. I just can't remember what it is, so I need to research that.
Okay,
So we're not doing anything more on battery right now, right? So, I mean, it
Well-
seems like, are we running with what Laura's got?
I think
No, we'll do that this time, yeah.
we'll do that. I'll think about whether or not we can use this forward energy
Okay.
prediction, but that's, other than that,
I mean,
it's fine.
Pretty good.
It's
Okay.
good
Yeah,
models.
definitely
It looks like it's a good
Yeah.
methodology. Everything seems like
Yeah.
it's all in order. I think it's
Well,
fantastic.
Well,
No, absolutely.
I had one question on the battery. What are the benefits of staggering battery installation over several years based on the predicted reduction in battery costs?
It's a good idea. The only downside of that would be if we were to gain any economies of scale from having one EPC, deploy everything at the same time. That might save us some in costs there.
Buy the
Combined
head
purchase.
with enough capacity for 5 or 6 further purchases and just add the modules.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And related to that, what is your opinion about the way we're looking to spend the money? You made comments earlier on that we ought to try to double down on the battery investment.
This goes back to the meeting about a larger battery at the substation. Is that
Well,
what you were talking
2
about?
batteries rather than just one.
Well, my feeling there was, again, the economies of scale, unless we have circuit specific issues that need to be addressed hyper locally. It seems to me that it would be more cost effective. You've got to pour the concrete, you've got to do a bunch of wiring and stuff. Let's just do it once and put 5 megawatts in rather than have these distributed batteries, where you've got to do everything multiple times. But we're kind of already headed down that road because we're putting in a smaller battery at the middle school. So I don't know.
So, one other question on batteries before we leave, and that is, would it be really a better place, is the middle school battery on the bus bar that is suffering from solar saturation right now? Or not?
Yes,
It is on that bus bar. It
I
will-
believe it is, yes.
Okay, so that will help that bus bar. I was gonna suggest that this next battery that we're gonna purchase also go on that bus bar if that's the one that's challenged. Well, why not? But if you already have the capacity at the middle school, then we can put this really anywhere. I don't think it's.
Actually,
Need to
that
put the
the middle schools
middle school,
offset the additional solar that is being put on at the middle school, right? We're putting on roughly 1.247 megawatt DC.
Yeah,
of
so maybe it would still be beneficial if we put this second battery on that bus bar, because that.
Or don't we have an issue on ice up in the landfill area anyways on that bus bar? I mean, we were
Yeah.
on a good one, but the.
That
I think so.
That feeder line is
Yeah.
apparently, according to Dave,
Yeah.
that feeder line can run in reverse and then it redistributes out to other feeders. So it's not the end of the world that the landfill is generating a healthy amount.
but we could put the CMS battery at the, up at Forest Ridge if we wanted to. I'm not saying politically, given where we are with plans, but technically, that wouldn't affect its function relative to the value we're trying to add to the operation, would it?
Well, not to the global economics you've been looking at, but remember, I keep talking about this local circuit management. And to the extent the batteries needed or required for that, I mean, I can't, that is not that value is not being quantified. It's basically needed operationally or it's not needed, right? And in this case, if it's needed, it's almost infinitely valuable.
Or there's a question as well if we are thinking about batteries for both the landfill projects and the CCHS project potentially. Maybe instead of doing like one at each, if we were even thinking about that, doing like 2 at the landfill or something like that.
Wouldn't be the end of the world. It would be fine. You know, well, we can get to that, but,
Well,
I
are
don't
we
think-
running out of time to? we
I
can't
think,
have this
I think,
discussion?
I think we need to move to the high school
Okay,
topic.
Mhm.
I think we've covered this and Laura's gonna send Wendy and me the model, and so we'll have something to work with and.
well, let's restate the question though. This has to do with where do batteries, we never have resolved this in terms of function and value. The sensitivity of that value to its specific location on the grid. I mean, does it help to have the thing local to the array that is doing the generation, or can it be somewhere else on that branch? And add the same amount of value. Now, we don't have to answer the question now. I'm just saying that I think that is one of the
It's an
questions.
important question. It's an
Okay.
important question. And I think Laura just at least made a comment that having it locally on that feeder line, which is going to have another mega and a half of solar, will help with that line itself. It's a
So
localized.
then we're using
hyper-local-
storage to protect feeder lines.
It's what it sounded like.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Laura.
It
correct
helps
me.
solar saturation.
Well,
I mean-
but Charlie's asking a very local question, like,
Yeah,
is
no.
there literally a locale that will oversaturate and
Right.
harm other things that's not, that isn't helped if you put it way far down the same
Yeah.
bus bar and not right
Yeah.
there? And maybe I misunderstood Laura.
Theoretically,
correct me.
can all the storage be central in one location and solve our problem of overgeneration and grid protection? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know the answer to that, but what I've been led to believe by the little bit of information that Mr. Wood shared, and that I think I've been able to glean is that, you know, there are definitely local benefits to putting it in certain places. And but I can speak to it.
Very little information.
No.
Very, very, very little information.
Yes, that would be correct.
All right,
Okay,
with that said, let's
moving
move
right
on.
ahead.
Okay, so I'm gonna provide my best update on CCHS. Wendy can certainly chime in, but I've watched the full tape.
I was
so-
also there.
And Charlie wasn't enough. So, the school committee met. They had our points that we had forwarded to them, and they were front and center. All the members had them and read them. And the debate went around in a, you know, it was a pretty broad discussion of all kinds of things about solar. Point number one, there's no appetite for the basin. We have made it clear in the points that were distributed that we intend to keep that on our list going forward. They didn't really have a lot of pushback against that. You know, the superintendent offered, oh, we have issues at the campus with impervious surface and this and that, but we're going to keep it on our list. But it does mean for that particular item that I'm going to have to follow up very carefully with engineering, the town engineer, to see if we can really do it there. And if we can keep it on our list. If it comes to some kind of impasse where this town engineer is saying, no, you really can't, then we will not have it in our report. We're just
Also,
gonna take it off.
also following up with the tree people.
Yeah, I've already followed up with the three people. We're fine with, we're copacetic with them. They think we can find a win-win location for their trees. That's a non-issue. So that's off the table, but they had a really robust conversation about the roof. And there were good points made about maintaining a set of arrays on a roof. You got to pick them up if the roof needs to be maintained. You got to put them back down. It's an expense. And so those points were made. But in the end, during the discussion phase, they went through our points one by one, and all members agreed to all of the points on our document. Okay, but they then had a separate agenda item, which was to take a motion to take action against our points. And then when they came to that thing, the chair read the points, and then the motion that was actually offered was very weak. The motion that was offered was to do a feasibility study.
Wow.
It was not.
What are we doing?
Cover all.
But you know what, in the bullet,
Well,
if
it's
you recall,
feasibility study that we're gonna do with the
Well,
light plan.
because our action
Or light plans.
originally
Right.
was to do the feasibility, so we were trying to get to the next step, but in one of those bullets was that there's still a second place where they can say no to the project.
They can say.
Well, let's talk about that.
But-
No, that's not,
I mean, no,
okay.
it's-
That's a very important question. Saying no to something that you've agreed to saying no, no, based on a change of mind of something you previously agreed to would be sort of an act in bad faith. So I think it's important for us to understand that after we come up with whatever agreement we want to have, that they understand that we're not going to go back, and that they shouldn't go back and say, well, we don't want to do this because we wanted to get $50,000 a month.
Well, no, they're.
This is what happens.
I know it's what happens, so that's why I said that the motion was weak. It was just to do a feasibility study, did not include the remainder of our points. But the point that the chair wanted to make clear, and Alexa Anderson, who's the chair of CPS, wanted to like chime in on, is we have broad capacity here to, you know, to give our approval at later stages to how this is going to go. That particular point in our set of points has to do with the scope. It literally has the word scope in the point. I don't have it in front of me, but it does. So once they agree fully, we will be on board, and it will be an act of bad
That's not
faith.
what I'm saying. Now, what I'm saying is saying no at some future point in time, based on a previous agreement with respect to a specific point, is a no-no.
Right.
And they need to understand
Oh, no,
this.
that's.
No, that is not understood. Because they think they can say no at any
No, but I think
point in
this-
I
time
don't
for
think
any
they, I
reason.
don't, Charlie, I don't
I
think they
think
do.
this is-
I don't think they do.
No,
Let's
no,
cut it off. Stop. We're not talking about that anymore.
Okay,
Okay, we're not. All right? Everybody at the table was in agreement. There was statements about this broad sense of, you know, approval and scope. But it did not sound to me like they were just like, hey, we have an out clause for
Yeah.
anything at any time. That is not how I interpreted it. But again, the motion was weak. It didn't include all of the things in our thing. So to that point, I have distributed in the packet let me see if I can bring it up. Back in, find it.
Did I miss
Would it be
something?
prudent to have a conversation with the individuals who are running for the school board
They were there. Well, I don't
Um,
think it's.
prior to the election?
It's certainly a good question, but for now, what we need to do is bring everybody into agreement that what we're doing when we go forward absolutely includes the whole revenue component of this. And that is why I put together the thing that's in your packet tonight.
I want to look at that because I'm like, I missed it. Sorry.
Uh,
But the other thing I'll just comment while you're saying that is that there was a discussion and I think it was very clear that all the revenue goes to light plant.
Yeah,
period.
yeah, it was.
That was super.
In the
clear, right?
discussion.
Well, I'm not getting at so much the revenue, I'm getting at
No, 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 but I just-
anything that we come to agreement, the way this works for any one of these deals that we're doing, where people can back out at any time. They shouldn't back out based on something that
They
they changed their mind on that they previously agreed to. And this needs to be understood, so that it isn't just an opening to, hey, we change our mind, we change our mind. Well, no, you really shouldn't be changing your mind.
The spirit was only if it wasn't.
And that's exactly why I'm suggesting if we can have full conversations with some of the candidates, the composition of the school committee will change significantly.
Yeah, well, let's keep going.
Let's, I don't really want to get into the political angle of this so much, Phil. I know that that's important, but it will matter. But I would prefer to have our committee not be in the position of we're endorsing a candidate, for example,
No.
because of their
Yeah.
position.
No.
I just think that that's probably not,
You wanna put the agreement thing up there?
yeah, hold on.
So
if I can find
so
it.
it was the approval for the siting.
Yeah, it's all about the stroke of the sighting is
Yeah,
really all it
okay,
is. Let me
yeah.
see if I can add it to the
Yeah.
next here.
Well, there's a little preamble up there too, though. That's pretty important.
Oh, no. Which one of the
Well-
ones which one do you want to see up there, Joe?
The one that is the
The partnership element.
three statements about
Yeah.
partnership.
Okay, we're doing that.
Oh,
That's
that's,
right.
yeah, that wasn't.
But I'll put that up.
That's-
Just one sec. During the meeting.
And I think, Laura, I think this is important for the CMLP to weigh in on, because I think as we've talked with any partner that you're trying to do this work with, backing out after we've spent money is not a good look. So we want to protect your interests first,
Right.
and then any partner that wants to play the game along those lines, along those rules, can play. But if you don't agree to that, then it becomes a bad business decision to be making some of these investments.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy for the school board to say, sure, let's agree to have the light plant spend money on a feasibility study, because we're not really committing ourselves to anything else.
Yeah, I mean, this feasibility study is, we do the feasibility studies, no skin off us. Well,
Right.
it is skin off anybody that agrees to have the town put out the money to do a feasibility study, because they're expensive.
All right, I'm trying to get to the point where I can share here, so just one sec.
Any
So that's all I was saying, Dean, when you got mad.
Well,
Are you good now?
I'm good.
Okay,
We're getting them,
Yeah.
we're gonna get them to a position where the things on our points list are agreed to.
these are for the light plant to.
Yeah.
To decide that they like or don't like, and I think we need to make sure we understand the set of conditions that the light plant would like to see, and that we pursue those.
All right, so there's the draft agreement that's in your packet.
Is it in the packet?
I think so. I think it's after the minutes.
Yes.
Okay.
Um, Anyway, so the first item on there is that all revenue from generation will accrue to CMLP. That's part of the agreement. Okay, so that's agreed upon. And then we're gonna go out, find a third party, and determine with the schools what the requirements for access to getting on the roof, determine the preliminary layout of the panels, future mechanical uses, and determine whether the structural carrying capacity can handle it. And the third party will also evaluate the membrane, see that it can take it and how long it will probably last, anticipating one roof flop replacement. This was a point that was raised by one of the members of the committee, who was very concerned about the cost of, picking up panels and putting them back down. So this includes us doing that during the lifetime of the panels. And then, once the feasibility study has concluded, we'll agree on a final layout of the panels, as well as any other infrastructure modifications necessary for the project. So, and the battery, they left the battery open, they did not take it off the menu. But
Because of the feasibility.
because the feasibility,
right.
yeah, because of where they are. So we're kind of moving the battery forward with this kind of optional status for the moment. Identify possible locations for storage for review by the district. The parties will reach an agreement as to whether storage on the campus is going to be permitted. So this is still an open item and we're fine with that. But this captures all of our points that we need, and they still retain the scoping rights as to where it goes on the roof. Which is the point that they're trying to interpret as being a little broader, I think, than is really.
A lot of that involves questions about loading
Yeah,
on the roof.
that's right.
Subject to engineering.
Engineering.
I'm
Yeah.
just wondering.
They're not gonna, Hunter's not gonna go up there and figure out whether the beams are strong enough.
No,
But I'm just wondering, when the roof was designed, was this explicitly considered, and is there some
We don't
data?
know.
That's gonna be validated.
It'll be
as part
I
of
don't know,
the-
but I think what we ought to do is ask Laura to look this over very carefully and advise as to the appropriateness of this to basically protect us from a lot of back and forth that potentially could happen.
I sent this to Jason, proactively to see if there was any comment or feedback that he had on this. I haven't gotten anything back from him on it. And specifically, I said to him that the March 15th date is aspirational. Now, we do have our March 7th hearing. And this slides past the March 7th hearing date, and we'd love to get this thing done before the March 7th date. But nonetheless, we need some date in there, and I don't know what we're gonna want to, but we need to get the school committee or the representative to really sign on the dotted line. We agree to these things. This is, the motion that was made did not capture all of these details. It did not capture the fact that the revenue will really all flow to CMLP, and we will not be, as Charlie said, backing up over
And
that.
I don't think there's gonna be a problem with that, but I think getting it
Well,
writing is a good,
no,
listen,
it-
wait, I'm just gonna say this. I think in spirit of it, they agree. Getting it in writing, it's not a bad thing. My question
This
is,
is business.
who's gonna help facilitate getting this written, is that you?
I will do everything I can to get
Yeah, just-
parties to
yeah,
sign these
okay.
things.
Well, I think we ought to ask Laura, can we ask Laura, can you work with Jason to make sure this basically covers the interest of the light plant? Rather than hoping Jason responds to the email, could you just say, hey,
We'll talk about it.
All right.
did you look it over now, just now? Did you see anything issue with it? Does it look good?
Well, your word aspirational is impossible, is the word impossible in my vocabulary.
So we need a date of some kind. We need some kind of end date where we agree this is gonna get done by.
I understand.
But I just put that, as I said, it's aspirational. When I sent it to Jason, I said it's an aspirational date, and if
Who's
that can't-
going to do the feasibility study?
Well, let's
Yeah.
focus on this first. Let's make sure that we have you guys signed up to go basically agree that this is what you want, because we don't want to take it to the school committee until we know this is your thing.
Yeah, I think I wanna think about it. I wanna talk to Jason. I wanna talk to Joe. And just see if, they have any ideas about how we might wanna either make this more explicit or include anything else, or, I just wanna think about it a little bit.
Okay, we just. Let's just say this, at the light board meeting, the light board approved feasibility money.
Yes.
And if we're gonna spend that money, I'd love to have this in place before.
Need to have it.
The dollars go out the door.
Need to have
I
it before we
don't
sign
want the
those deals.
schools coming back and saying, we just approved this feasibility study and we didn't. And keep your study and put it on the shelf. We're not doing this. We don't like the terms or something. I just want them bought into this bought into this set of things. So,
And also, this stuff, again, we don't want to get too fancy, because this basically is exactly what we presented to them at the meeting. or
that's
you
right,
presented to them.
the 5 or 6 points
These are
that we
bullets,
have,
these
the
are the bullets.
bulleted points are kind of covered here with sentences, but that's really what's happening.
But who does the feasibility study?
It's contracted by the light plant,
The light plant will figure that out.
and yes,
Is it clear or could it be?
It doesn't
They'll
matter.
figure that out, it doesn't
Doesn't
matter to
matter.
us,
a qualified third party, and that's going to be done by the
they
light.
know how to do that.
No, my concern is the unqualified third party.
Well, they know how to get third parties to know how to do it.
No,
Like that.
I'm raising the question, if several committee members of the school committee decide they're the right.
No,
You-
no, this is the light plant is doing,
They know the light, they know the light.
they have
plans.
already agreed that the light plant will conduct the feasibility study. That's what they've agreed to.
Okay, because I don't read that.
Well, it doesn't need to be explicit up there,
Because they-
it's fully understood.
Yeah,
All
they-
cost of design, engineering and construction, including feasibility, will be borne by CMLP.
That's
So the
everything,
school
yep.
has no responsibility related to those items.
Yeah, right.
Good.
Right now, the only one thing, there's multiple rooftops.
Right,
You only refer to one rooftop in the singular here.
That covers, that should basically
Covers
understood to
anything.
cover the
Okay,
whole,
no,
everything.
The scope is identified in the bullet points as being the entire,
Roofs.
roof of the building.
Okay.
And
That's
that's
good.
the scope,
Yeah.
and they can prune that back. We want a mechanical item over here, we need access for a
Yeah.
crane over
I just
here.
didn't want them to say,
No.
oh, well, I thought you meant this building.
No, no,
Not
no.
that, not
Yeah, I
the tin roof, or
I
not this
understand,
roof, yeah. okay.
Cadmus kind of took a picture and they said, let's put them here and here.
Yeah.
So what we want them to do is look at the whole thing and say,
So
okay,
that's what I'm trying to get
Yeah.
at.
Yeah.
The whole thing is
The
what I
whole
want.
thing is,
Yeah.
is in scope,
Okay, okay.
so this is good, so Laura, you'll talk to Jason and
yeah.
potentially refine this?
I understand the urgency and we'll get on it promptly.
Yeah, it's just, we need to get this tied off. So the other item on this agenda right now is a point of contact, and I did speak to Jason about this, and he said that you, Laura, would probably be running point on this project, and that your finance person over at the light plan, is his name Bob, I think?
Matt,
That would, backfill on questions of, financial items or other things that are not necessarily of a technical nature. Can we assume that I can communicate to the school committee that you will be the parallel person with Bob Conry, who they've assigned as the point of contact? He's their finance director. So but when he was mentioned in the meeting, it was Bob Conry's our point of contact, but Russ Hughes, who's our facilities manager, will work off through technical issues
Right.
on that
Yeah.
side of it. So I think that having 2 points of contact, one for more financial and one for more technical, will work well on both sides of this.
but you want one single point of contact.
I want a
You want
primary.
one- you want
I
one
need a
person.
primary. I need a primary.
One
So,
person.
Laura, if you could serve as the primary on this, that would be helpful. I think that was Jason's idea, but you need to talk to him. 'Cause that's.
Yeah,
I
you
don't
can have a
want-
team, you can have 5 people on your team,
Steve, you can have as many as you
but
want.
we should only have one person,
Yeah,
yeah.
you just need it. So, I think that's kind of where we are with that. And we just need quick turnaround on this because you're in the position to spend money now. I mean, the
Yeah.
school committee has approved a feasibility study. The light board has approved money to do a feasibility study, and we need this thing to just tie off the assumptions of the project so far going forward. And then-
Yep.
The light plant fee is, there was a dollar figure in that approval, and it was for the landfill and.
Yes, it was. It's-
But they don't, they're
I'm
okay,
just
They're fine.
saying.
they're fine.
Yep.
there is a limit.
Yep. So I think we can move on. Is there anything else we want to cover on the high school? No? Okay. The landfill, so how are we on time? 7:49. We're kind of not doing so well, but we'll try to make up some time. The landfill, give us a quick, I'm gonna stop sharing. Give you a quick update. That would be helpful, Laura. I know that this has been challenging to find a vendor. So let us know how that's going.
Yeah, so I believe we already discussed the conversation we had with Kearsarge where they provided their verbal estimates, cost estimates and capacity estimates. Is that true? Okay, so we don't have to go over that. I've been on the phone with a few different people trying to find really the right party to do this. I mean, I feel like we don't want just a general contractor like a TRC, we need someone who actually has experience building on a slope. And there certainly are projects out there, if you just Google for dollars, you'll see projects on greater than 20% slopes down in Atlanta and places, but what we're really looking for is somebody with a local presence that can really look at this and not have to learn on the fly and can speak, with some authority. So we're just having, it's just a little bit more difficult to find that very specific expertise because it's not like, I don't think it's very widespread. I think it's been done, but, it's not being done everywhere. So, and it's still evolving. And the technologies that people are using to, try to overcome the obstacles that the steep slope presents are changing as materials change and different ideas come up. So it's a little bit of a moving piece. We might need to hurry. So we're still working on that.
Okay, if that's what the status is, that's what the status is.
Yep.
To get, you were at the light board meeting, I'm calling the landfill a TBD at this point, like we may need to pull this off the menu if we cannot get through an analysis. All we have so far are verbal things from Kearsarge. We think we can put this much, nameplate capacity in this area. We think it'll, Dave said, we think it's 10% more than $1.50 a watt to build it on a slope like this. These are all very mushy and not very, you can't go to town meeting with these, so.
I'm a little bit more optimistic about it, I think, than you are, just based on the conversations I've had with Kearsarge and their certainty. I mean, I think, ready to move if we wanted them to build it, to say yes to this. So I have a little bit more optimism, I guess is the right word, that it is technically feasible and that its cost would ultimately be less than the rooftop at the school.
This is a completely separate question, which we have not explored.
Yeah.
Will Kearsarge just build to suit and just leave it by, or are they only in the PPA?
No, they want a piece of the action, and that's why I don't really like using them, but yeah. I can ask the question, but I'm 98% sure that it will tell us no, they're not going to do that.
They would not just expend resources for a fee. Obviously, we'll pay them to do it, but it's not a business they want to be in. It's just construction, solar construction.
I believe that's the case. They make their money from the long-term PPA. They get the financing, they earn a return, and they send that to the bank, and that's sort of their business model.
They couldn't price it out as a construction project because they've gone so far down the road on this thing. It seems crazy, but if they want to just totally walk away from the sunk costs, they can. But if we ask them, will you do it as a construction project? Please give us a price.
Yep.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt to ask.
Less than a rooftop is good, but it's not totally convincing as to
Yeah, it's not.
as to the attractiveness of the site, so.
Our
So use this.
yeah.
First, they threw out verbally on the fly. I did the arithmetic on it. In other words, they gave us a price for just the solar expansion. Okay, not the slope, just putting new panels and repowering the existing site. And they gave us a price for everything, which included repowering plus the slope. So if you just back engineer that, it works out that the slope alone was about a 38% lift up on the main.
On the main thing, yep.
Just realize something. It happens that the company that designed and installed ours did it on a significant slope. Now, I can't,
Ours?
our home,
At his house.
Oh,
Just to be clear, they can put a post as far down into the ground on your property as they want, but on
Right.
a
you can put it
landfill
down in
cap,
bedrock.
they can put it down bedrock if they want. So it won't go anywhere on the slope. It's not gonna fall down the hill. on a landfill, you have an engineered cap with clay and fabric, and you can't pierce it. You can't go through it. You might be able to put something that's down a little bit into it, but not very far. And so as a result, all the mountings are very challenging. You gotta, and when it's on a slope, if you're just putting like cinder blocks, it's gonna slide down the slope over time. So it's very carefully engineered, and it's not the same as what you might
Too
have.
bad, because.
It is too bad. It is too bad, but that's the way it is.
But if we get a 38% uplift to $1.50 per kW, that's $2.07 a kilowatt. So I'm just saying, it might be a better, more feasible project than the high school. I don't know.
Well, the high school is about 1/3 the amount of nameplate capacity, somewhere in the vicinity of 1/3. And it's got an NPV of negative $258,000. Is that about something like that? That's a pretty bad, it's a pretty bad investment. Not great. So, yeah. So we're struggling on that. And if this one's, maybe this one, but this one's 3 times as large with a slightly better NPV, you're still probably gonna be in a $400,000 NPV, negative 4, negative 5.
To that point, that we have run models,
Yeah,
in terms of the route, I mean, there's a full-blown feasibility, but I wonder if someone should just skinny down and say, what could you actually put up there?
right.
Because
Do a
it's
phase
not
one
looking
feasibility.
good financially at all for the route.
We put 1,000 panels up there, I think. Is that it?
That's what we think we can. That's what we think. What Wendy's saying is, let's do the easiest panels we can put up there and just call it a day.
The easiest panels.
No, I'm saying let's just validate, really, quickly,
Do a-
instead of doing the building,
Full
the
phase of-
foundation,
yeah.
feasibility study, I'm like, can somebody just go up there and say, really? Where could you put panels quickly and figure out?
Well, what we
1,000?
initially said was we wanted to have kind of a sniff test rather than
Yeah.
going full.
Well,
on.
I'm just saying.
with you. That's
Saying,
exactly.
So,
Do a preliminary before you do the full.
is that what you're planning to do in terms of a strategy for the feasibility is to do an initial boom, quick, let's get a rough analysis by looking at the as-built drawings and sizing it up,
Steps feasibility.
before we
Yeah.
invest in determining structural integrity and getting a certification, that sort of thing?
Well, I don't know, the scope that we just reviewed on the draft agreement did talk about checking the roof viability in addition to looking at the solar capacity potential, right?
So what's in there now?
This is the document that we just
Right,
reviewed.
but-
It
but-
says-
No,
it says
I'm
we're-
asking
Check the
for
roof.
what's in your feasibility document so far. What's in your,
It's a feasibility document so far.
There isn't one.
or you don't have
Yeah.
one so far?
But so what we're saying is, if you do it in a stepped feasibility study, someone would look at take a wag and say, how many panels do you think we could get out here? At what capacity, just as a real rough take, throw that into the model, see where the economics go.
Yeah.
See if you're dead in the water already.
Oh, we're already in the water. I know
Right.
that. We put 10 candles up in the water.
Well, I guess there's that, right? Because
Well, what do you mean by dead in the water?
No, what I'm saying is that the school could say they don't like panels here, whatever. We can also say, this just doesn't work.
Well,
Well, on what basis
At
though?
what point do we pull the plug and say, yes, we got into the feasibility and okay, great, we can only get X number of panels. We can only get so much weight. We can only do, at what point do we have a cutoff that say, this isn't
this
worth
is worth
going
the
forward?
time.
Well, we should talk about that a little bit.
We're backing up to the previous.
Well, okay, so
topic.
what do we know that, what do we think we've agreed to? What basis have we agreed to proceed on so far? I think we've agreed to proceed on the basis that if we get roughly a half a megawatt, from a sizing point of view, and it costs no more than $250, that financially we're good to go.
So there's our gate.
That's kind of the way we've modeled it.
Sort of.
We've
Good
modeled
to
it.
go. Now, if all of a sudden we have to do all this razzmatazz to do the interconnect, and that's hugely expensive,
Or structural reinforcement.
or structural, or whatever. But then, to your point though, I mean, going beyond the initial sort of baseline check or sniff review, somebody needs to look on those as-bills and say, either this is or this isn't doable.
That's what I'm saying. There's a few gating issues here.
And the other issue is the quality of the roof. Is the roof gonna make it for another 15 years? If the roof doesn't make it for another 15 years,
You don't put anything on it.
well,
Well, no, you pick them up once and put them back down, I mean.
if the roof only lasts 5 more years, then what are you gonna do?
You pick them up and you put them down and you assume they'll
Pick
go
them
the
up
rest of
and
the
put them
life.
down twice?
No, you pick them up and put them down once.
Well, the roof is gonna have to last 25 years.
Well, it
Okay,
should.
maybe we don't have to
Oh,
keep
oh,
this
well,
conversation.
Well,
let's
you know
stop.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah,
talking about.
we've closed that one off.
Well, we're
Closed
talking
that
about
one
this, we're talking about the sniff test thing here.
Well, you've already set the parameters. You've
off.
already
We
mentioned
need,
those.
we need that little
Yeah.
limited agreement between the
Yeah.
schools and the light plan.
Yeah.
That's what we need,
Right.
okay?
Once-
So that's the to-do tonight.
I'm
Not,
just
not
responding-
the
I'm
scope
responding
out
to Steve's-
this,
Steve's question.
I know.
Okay, if you wanna
You're-
close that off.
I'm
we're
closing that
okay.
off, we're done.
Alright.
We can't just keep beating that horse, we're so far from there at this point that it isn't funny, we need an agreement that it doesn't exist yet.
Well, we need this people signed up to do the study, is what we need.
Right, that's also true.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think we've got as far as we're gonna get with the landfill, but I do think it would be helpful to ask Kearsarge if they would do construction.
Okay,
Construction for RFP. So on the management and control system, I'm not really looking to get too far into this tonight. But I will just say that for the light board, I was very frank with them that there's a lot of infrastructure stuff that's on the plate right now at the light plant. And that just adding another infrastructure system into the mix is really not preferred at the moment. You're doing AMI, you're working on metering domain, you're also working on SCADA. There's stuff already in the pipeline, which is significant infrastructure stuff. And we do feel as though this is an important item. So I put this in the TBD category for the light board meeting the other day. And we may pull it off, but another way to think about this would be to pull it off only partially and add a little slice of money into the warrant request that gets us some studies, that gets us an initial look at the CMLP network, that gets us a future load predictive sort of study. These kinds of things would set us up to understand how a system like that could automate some of the daily capture and arbitrage that you're looking to do, that sort of thing. So it's it doesn't have to completely come off. It could come off at the level of we leave 100K in there for,
I think that's a great idea.
and it gets you information if you're inclined to let, another company come in and do some study work for you. It gets you some forward information about how systems like this might be beneficial.
It
So-
almost sounds like we're at the point where we should think of coming up with two sets of numbers. One, which is building on what they have today, if they never heard about this company you found, and the other, whether you scrap some of it or not, doing the more modern approach, and look at the numbers.
I'm not sure I quite understand what you're suggesting. We can only go to town meeting with one number, and we have to finalize what that is. So that's why I'm making an alternate suggestion tonight, which is that we sort of, prune back our aspiration. Our aspiration was for the studies and then the configuration, full implementation of one of these microgrid control systems. And that just seems like it's a little far in the future and it's a little bit premature.
You don't think we can get two sets of numbers?
I don't know what that
We
means.
wouldn't need it.
I don't know what's that
We'll
mean.
only bring
Why
one.
would we need two sets of numbers?
We can only bring one
No,
set to the.
only one to town meeting, we have to make a decision, it appears, between two approaches. One which is this more automated system that you've been discussing. The other is what the light plant would have done if they'd never heard of it.
Well, that's already in the battery model that Laura provided. So they have a few strategies which are not, they're kind of automatic and they're also a sort of a hands-off. One is that you do this thing called metering domain. And so if there's extra energy flowing, it just pushes out and we just take what we can get from the ISO. The other is we outsource to Energy New England to manage our batteries and have them cycle the batteries. And it's hands off by the light plant, more or less. And it's an outsourced service. So there's an alternate that doesn't involve any money that we would have to put in. Does that explain it? I mean, I think that's pretty much the picture, is that the systems would sort of take care of themselves, absent this microgrid control system.
Battery, but not the solar, right? Like the.
No, solar would just flow back out to the grid, because it just
Well, that's
flows
pretty
back.
now, for now, I guess it can, right, because of 5 megawatt.
Yeah,
Well,
with the
they're
5,
in the-
yeah, we're within that.
Yeah, well,
So the,
Yeah.
my view on this control system is we want to put enough in there to keep some momentum going.
Yes.
It might not be that study that we proposed or that they proposed, because I know Joe had objections to that. He said, well, we're gonna do the SCADA thing and that's gonna produce all that information, so you wouldn't need to do it that way. But I think that it might be worth coming back and sorting out another approach to doing feasibility. Maybe we just put the money in there and then figure out later, how we're gonna do it.
That works too.
But we don't really have a marriage between what you guys are doing with the SCADA and what that study really is all about, because they're kind of,
Right.
so
That's the
I
point
think,
that I was concerned about.
Yeah,
but I think we should definitely have something in there that keeps the momentum going, and it doesn't commit us to
Right.
implementing it, but it keeps the momentum going.
I think another point about this, which would help kind of bolster our position on it, is that we're trying to encourage the rest of the community to do things and build out, solar. We would love to see Middlesex and Fenn and 300 Baker Avenue and the Emerson Hospital all engage in some of these sustainability efforts. And solar saturation is a break on that. Some of these batteries may help that, but a system that's in place to help understand and monitor and adapt and respond to these things automatically would really be able to help us energize the town's sustainability efforts and allow the private sector, which doesn't require the town to constantly be having these massive bond issues, get involved. So I just feel as though having a control system that's specifically there for distributed energy resources, it will be important, and we just need to keep the moment as choices, keep the momentum.
So we would keep the batteries under our control and under this model.
Under this model, what?
And it could be every man gets his own system if he wants it from a solar point of view, and we simply continue to grow the system in a way that protects it.
Yeah.
So that's probably not the way you would say it, Laura, but yeah, I mean, I think that was Dave's strategy over there at Baker Avenue. We want them to do the investment in the solar, but we're gonna control the battery because we'll need a battery. I don't know whether you recall any of those discussions, or whether they actually had any.
But, the latest from them is that they are going to put the solar in and they're going to put the battery in and control it themselves. It's going to be 100% behind the meter.
Wow.
Oh, they're gonna keep the battery for themselves.
Okay.
They're gonna have their own battery.
Well, that way they'll be
Well,
able to really optimize.
Great.
you know how financially that was gonna work anyways.
Exactly. Well, okay.
The point is that we have an allocation in the article.
Yep.
Yeah.
We're questioning the value of it because we believe that we can't implement it
Right.
right now.
Yeah.
So we want to preserve funds so that we can continue to study, to keep the momentum going.
Right.
Because overall, we're eventually gonna need this, and we just don't have enough. The timing isn't right now, but we should continue to study it and gather knowledge.
that's the,
Summarize.
that's a good summary.
Yeah.
And the question is like, what kind of a number do we think would be like a good number? Like, I was thinking like, leave 100.
I think that the 100 was the original number
Yeah.
for the feasibility. They had 100 we had 100 for the feasibility, which was all the analysis.
Yeah.
Training, staff, discussions, all that kind of
Right.
stuff. And 500 for the hardware and the
And the configuration, the setup.
installation.
Yeah.
Do you think, Laura, you think this is something that, based on what you kind of hear through the woodwork over there, coming out of the woodwork, that this is something that might be amenable, this kind of, I know you mentioned the word tonight, control system, so maybe you're,
I'll be honest and open with you guys. I've struggled to understand the current needs of our system and what the DERMS would provide and how that would help us solve where we are right now. And I've come to have an understanding, obviously from talking to Joe, that I think you guys have characterized it correctly, using the words premature and timing isn't right. I think we are, the way Joe describes it, so far away from meeting the optimization of the DERM system. Like you're trying to, I don't know, this isn't a good analogy, but thread a needle while we are, still, it's not a good analogy, but it's too late at night. We're trying to hit the side of a barn right now, and you guys are like focused on the splinters of wood in the beams on the side of the barn.
yeah, I hear you,
Yeah,
I hear you.
All right, well, yeah, I hear that. One thing that what I think might be helpful, and I don't know if there's any appetite for this, would be to just have the guys from Eaton give you their hour and a half deck that they gave Charlie, me, and Brian Folds. It's very eye-opening to just understand what a system like this is capable of. And if we could certainly, forward that off to them, and they could set up a time to just do it. They do it through Zoom. We don't have to go anywhere, and it's very informative. I put a chunk of their deck in a previous meeting packet, but to have them give the show, so to speak, and take questions and everything, just kind of puts a little bit more frosting on that cake, so you'll understand it better. That's all.
Why don't I bring that question forward to the team, and I'll send you something in an email when I get a reply.
It's just, we're just trying to keep it alive, and I'm not necessarily and inherently pushing Eaton as the vendor, although they do your AMI stuff, and they're a quality company, there's no question they're a quality company. But just to understand what a microgrid control system is capable of doing, and there may be good collaborative interaction between the SCADA stuff that Joe's already deep into, and what this does. There may be overlap, and he would be able to identify that. We, as not being that familiar with all that he's been schooled up on what SCADA can do, we're not able to see that well. We asked a lot of questions about, well, how does this differ from SCADA? Well, this feeds SCADA. We didn't get too deep into it, but I think having them be able to give you a presentation would just at least allow us to keep this alive on the menu of the town meeting, so that you're more comfortable with us bringing at least 100 grand onto the warrant, without too many questions. That's all. So we'll keep that in mind. Well, that's-
The only other thought, I just wondered, Laura, if Michael Hale has any experience with these systems. He's the new.
that is a very good question.
Who's Michael?
Is he a consultant from or is he a town, is he a town
He's
resident?
being contracted.
That's what I thought. He's
So
being
it's
contracted to help us with
On the
our
technical
search.
side.
Yeah, on the
So-
technical
Yeah.
side with our search.
He was the town manager, I think, for 10 or 15 years, and then he was the light plant manager in Shrewsbury.
Yep.
And while he was there, he did build a solar facility.
Okay.
Did he build a storage facility?
No, he built a standalone solar And so he was in the office today and I was pinging him on any contacts he has for appropriate individuals. Help us identify, someone to do the feasibility study.
Getting back to this,
How we doing?
so the topic before we wrap it up.
We got it.
What about EME? I mean, can we, are we okay to have any access with them, or
Yeah, can they give us a quick,
could we talk to one of their
thing
guys?
is, can we have a thing, can somebody from E&E do a presentation inside our meeting? So we understand what that service is. That's something that would be helpful.
If
Because
they're
that,
gonna, yeah, if they're
that's
gonna
the
manage the
plan.
battery, if
Yeah,
they're gonna manage the battery, well,
yeah,
how do you do that?
yeah.
And what hardware what controllers do you provide? It has to be a controller, of some sort to make this work,
Yeah.
or two controllers.
Yeah, so since that's the
Yeah,
alternate to what we're proposing, is the alternative to what we're proposing is this outsourced service. I think that it would be helpful for the STF to just get a presentation from somebody at E&E about what that service is, how it works,
Plus
et
it's
cetera.
sort of embedded in Laura's
It's,
model.
it's in the model.
Yeah,
It's
it's sort
assumed,
of
it's
in-
assumed in the way we're pricing the model at the moment, so.
Yeah, Dave is very focused.
Yeah, well, it's priced as a service, part of the O&M
Yeah.
stuff.
Dave was focused on utilizing E&E specifically for this service, but there are other companies that provide this service that may be more cost effective. And my opinion, even though I feel the town is an equity owner in E&E, I feel it's our duty to the ratepayers to look at holistically look at this and make sure that that is the right partnership and that there isn't, a better service provider for that function.
that's a relief. So, I think one of the important things to know about this stuff that we looked at, the Eaton thing, is it's automated and it uses AI and it's predictive and all this kind of stuff. And they basically set you up so that they don't actually provide a service. They don't provide a so-called dispatching service. They set up your environment, and your environment, is designed to do what you want it to do. And, uses their best practices and their data and all that kind of stuff. And then they provide service to you to maintain that environment. They provide training and they provide software updates and consultation and stuff like that, but they don't operate the battery, if you know what I mean. It's all done through this automated intelligent controller that they sell. So that's kind of what that is. And I think that would be the interesting thing to discuss with your staff, if we can get this set up.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of companies that offer that type of solution, Charlie.
But not E&E maybe.
No.
Okay.
Companies that have created.
Yeah, I think what Dean said is we aren't so-called partial to Eaton. We don't own stock in Eaton, so we're okay.
Yeah.
I think this is a great model to consider of all the ways that one could go about this. And we're gonna need something, by the way, to get the money back on this battery, starting with the install a year from when? A year from, I guess in a year.
Town meeting.
I guess in a year. No,
Oh, for
a year. No,
CMS.
for CMS is,
Yeah.
it's gonna be up in a year, is it not?
Yes, it is.
School hopes to open during winter break in 2025, but I don't think there's a guarantee that the solar and the battery will be operating at that time.
Well, I know, but if we think about it in those terms, we'll be a little bit better off to kind of work through this, because it is a scary notion to spend all that dough on the battery and not know how to dispatch it.
Don't worry, we know how to dispatch it.
Well, I mean, you can send your guy over there and he can go like this. You really don't want to do that.
All right, I think we need to move on, and we have really kind of
We
squeezed.
do have more stuff, don't
We
we?
squeezed Gavin. I feel
Sorry.
terrible here because I didn't want to say we were squeezed by the end of battery value models. We have not caught up at all.
Well, this was good discussion. I thought this was helpful. It was helpful to me anyway.
Yeah, I just feel bad, like we're probably gonna have to kick the can down the road. What time is it here?
Well, maybe we should have a meeting.
We can kick the can down the road on the sighting stuff, can't we?
We can do that.
Yeah, why don't we do that?
Why don't we take 10 minutes, because we have 5 on the calendar, to talk about how this write-up is, how this
Yeah.
report is gonna get structured and how we get this done.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Is that
Sorry.
okay? I'm sorry, Gavin, it's.
No,
just,
no worries.
you
There,
know,
it's just a slideshow. I can go through it anytime. And this is more medium to longer term anyway. So just
well,
trying to give an eye to the report and next steps.
Yeah. Understood. So the thinking on this report is we need we need an overarching. We started with what we'll call an outline. So we have the two outline sets, and Gavin has been working hard and getting through what amounts to the site evaluations and the site, metrics, et cetera, that we're trying to pull together. And the other piece that Charlie mapped out had a really healthy number of things that we need to put out as fundamental terms and understood ways of talking about our light plant infrastructure, our systems, special language that is used.
Goals.
It also had goals, it also had
Metrics.
metrics about load and all kinds of things. It's a big piece. So that needs to be worked through. And since Charlie did the outline, I would kind of, let's put him on point for like, how do we pull this together? And Steve had said he was gonna do some work, and I don't know how much time you've had to do any, but.
But I mean, I'm volunteering to help. And
You're volunteering to help.
We have segments and.
Right.
Here, you take that
So-
one, take that one.
So I
Yeah.
think there's a couple of pieces here that can be, and maybe Charlie can farm them out, is like, hey, Steve, work on X and hand it back to me, or, Wendy, we need these graphs, or we need these metrics, or let's talk about load, a lot, you were on the light board for X amount of time. And so my suggestion, and I'm just throwing it out there, is that Charlie's kind of driving this report from the structural perspective and pulling the pieces together, filling in bits and bobs of writing where necessary, but also saying, this is how we're gonna structure the way we look at each individual property. And as long as, we've got this little box that describes the properties we're evaluating, then, and we filled in the right items, we're doing it. And, I'm free and available to, put a little French pastry on anything you need. And if I can, any of us can be ready to take an assignment and run with that and then feed it back to the point guy. And I think that's probably the only way we're gonna get this thing done, is to have, somebody in charge of doing it. And Charlie has very graciously kind of volunteered for that role. And, I'm happy to have somebody not be me,
Yeah.
because
So I
gotta
would
run
make
through the
one-
whole town meeting.
Make one quick comment. I think
Um,
the financial models, in terms of what they do and how they do what they do.
Yep.
And the values that we're using and so forth, that needs to be explained. I think of that as,
Yeah.
as the financial modeling piece, and that needs to be set in here as this is the way we get to what we get to in terms of making
Yeah.
decisions.
And all your assumptions and appendix.
Yeah, all that kind of stuff,
Around it.
So that's a big thing. We could take this storage thing, for example. There's a lot of voodoo, and I think at least, not for us, but I think that the select board sees this kind of as a black box. We don't understand this stuff. Well, I think this is a way for people to understand the entire environment, so.
Are you thinking of having, in effect, two versions? One which you described and another one for people who don't know a damn thing about.
Well, I think we want to think about this as having one target audience.
Mhm.
And then there's some secondary audiences. I think the target audience is the select board. Unless
The
I'm
secondary
mistaken.
audience is town meeting.
Well, I don't
And
think.
we need
I don't
a
think-
handout
I don't
for-
No,
think the-
No. it's
You have
not.
to have a layman's explanation
Right.
to this stuff, even though it's technical. The appendix can have all the lovely details.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, but so it's still a report, but it's the text. Which is.
Well, it's one report, but the story that we tell about what it is we've done and what we're recommending and the goals and all that and why we're doing this is, you know, the target of that is the select board. And I think that you have anything that you need to back it up, you have that to your point as appendices.
And even the select board, if you look at its composition, most of them, this is Greek to them.
Well, that's why we're gonna write this in layman's
In
terms.
Greek.
No,
No,
it's gonna be very straight.
Fairly
This stuff is,
straightforward. It's a,
stuff is not complicated. If you,
The details are.
well,
But when you
Well,
understand it
once
really
you
enough.
write a story around it, it
You write a
becomes a
story.
lot clearer.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So then if we can keep the report to being clear, as short as possible, just because of the volume of how much information we've gathered and the number of meetings we've had. And to put the technical things in the back and say, look, you know, see page appendix 4 for interest, you know, ISO rate structure, whatever it is, right? But to say that, you know, we're trying to meet sustainability, we're trying to maintain the protection of the grid. We're working closely with CMLP and other, you know, and this is the environment that we're working in. These are some of the constraints and these have been previously identified. We worked through this and we're still marching towards those goals. I mean,
As long as we understand that we're specifically, our primary audience are laymen.
oh yeah,
I think that's
Yeah.
true. That is absolutely.
because we are laymen.
we're laymen.
They-
Well, not at the same level.
Well, we're not power engineers, let's put it that way.
No, so I think to Phil's point, we have conversations around this table and people come to the party with very different amounts of investment in time and energy in understanding this space. And, so we're able to talk in a shorthand that sometimes leaves Phil, left out because he hasn't spent that much time in this. And so we don't want to leave a report on the select board table that sort of talks at the level that we tend to exchange here in this room.
Exactly.
Because there's too many assumptions in the way we exchange ideas of shared understanding. And so we need to make that explicit. That's all. I think that's a good point, Phil, and I think that
It was a good point.
Need to be part of the program.
And you raised something in passing. I'm wondering if it's something we can exploit. You pointed out that once we execute it, we're making it much easier for large privately owned facilities.
That's, I'm hoping.
Right.
Public
We're all-
partnerships.
Well, public,
I'm wondering if we
Partnerships,
should
yeah.
not have that explicitly as part of our story.
Well, it will be.
it will be.
It will be.
I think it will be. Yep. Yep.
Because that makes it attractive, some of our audience.
Yep. Yep.
It also explains what the town is doing in that regard and what we
Right.
Yeah.
understand,
Right.
so
Right.
partners can key into those factors where we're going.
So, yeah, we're trying to
We're
make
trying.
everything robust enough to be able to accept.
We'll have Eric write the conclusion.
Yeah.
You know, I'm still sort of,
Okay, so we're good.
I don't see anybody from the public here, so I'm good.
We're good.
Is there any
You know,
new business?
Let,
Phil asked us to have a new business item, so
Let's,
it's on there. Is there any new business?
None on my part.
Look,
good.
no, but it's a standing item. On your the first
Right.
meeting, we ended up with that, so it's a standing item. Okay, I think I need a motion. I literally don't see any.
motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, I need to take a roll call on that one. Okay, Gavin,
Aye.
Bill,
Aye.
Wendy,
Aye.
Charlie.
Yes.
Over here.
Where's Stephen? And
I was gonna
my
say,
Bill Dina, yeah.
Here.
Aye,
Here.
here. Yeah, you should say here, just to make us all confused. All right, thanks, everybody.